It is Monday morning, the Monday morning ELF live recap. We are live on YouTube, on Twitch, and also on Instagram. For you people on Instagram joining us, this is just our second time streaming on Instagram. Welcome, everybody. Hang around in this show. We've got great stuff. We're going to talk through all the games this past weekend. Then we're going to talk about the crazy playoff implications and what's going on in the final week of this league. And then Matt and I are going to talk about MVP candidates this week, and all you guys in the chat are going to be able to participate. So hang around there and help us decide who gets nominated for MVP this week. As I said, I'm here with my co-host, Matt Bressington, coming out of the United Kingdom. Whew, Matt, what's up, man? I'm excited this morning.
Oh, yeah. No, I'm feeling it. This was another good week. I think I say every week about my blood pressure. At this point in the season, I'm like way over where I should be, but this was a really fun week, and I enjoyed every single game.
Yeah, man, some good stuff, some surprises, some things that we expected, and we're going to talk about these games right now. And here I'm going to be checking the chat on Instagram, so you can talk in the chat on Instagram. We got you right here. You can talk in the chat on YouTube and Twitch. Get you guys involved, and most importantly, near the end of the show, you guys have to help us nominate 2 players to be the MVPs. We're going to go through all the top performances. So, Matt, shall we do it? Shall we dive on into some of the games in Week 13, starting off with the big bang from the West, a game that we talked about a lot in the previous week, highly anticipated, ended up being a rainy showdown in Paris, the Musketeers versus the Bravos. Matt, you streamed this live on your YouTube channel. Talk to me about this ball game.
This was everything I expected it to be. This was such a good game. Of course, we kind of picked our spots, and we kind of started off really hot on Paris, and then as the week kind of went on, we were like, Madrid could to come in and play the upset on this one. But like you said, the rain was absolutely the factor when it comes to this game. I was told the field was like not flooded, but very much waterlogged. But in my opinion, that made for much more of a fun game. Like the balls slipping around, we had multiple fumbles on each side. We had the run games that had to keep on going. We had defensive linemen and offensive linemen getting out. It was quite a chippy game, but I like it. It's a rivalry that's really organically being built. You know, like we have some rivalries that in cities are quite close. There's already kind of that installed rivalry. With this one, it's just kind of building up themselves organically because they're 2 potential playoff teams. They're trying to get into the playoffs. Both of them, we'll talk about that later. But for me, the show goes to Magic Zach, right? He had quite a slow start of the game, comes out in that fourth quarter, gets that like rush at the end with seconds left. Overtime comes in. We see that fumble come in to play, and then the redemption of the kicker to kick the game-winning field goal after missing it in the start. But I also want to give a shout to Alessandro Fernandez. First game back in the league, the Iceman, a player we've all missed this season. He's been dealing with injuries. He was spectacular in these games. Like, he was so good. He was everywhere. And the stats don't tell him the whole story, but he was wrecking that Paris offense, and he's probably the best run defensive end in the league. So his impact was immediately felt. This was a super fun game, another all-time classic, another overtime game. We didn't have an overtime game for like a year, and then we had 2 in the same, like in a couple of weeks, and it's been amazing. And I can't speak enough of this game. It was fantastic.
So what you said right there, 2 overtime games in back-to-back weeks, and all the people complaining about the games. Why don't you pay attention and watch some of these games, guys? This one was, man, it was a sloppy game, in my opinion. It was pretty sloppy. And the main takeaway that I have right now, all right, Paris has clinched the playoffs. They deserve it. Madrid has got to be kicking themselves because, in my opinion, they absolutely overlooked their game against Frankfurt the week before, keeping their eyes here on this Paris game. If they had just taken care of business against Frankfurt and still lost to Paris, they'd be in the playoffs for sure. Now, there's still a chance for them, but it's totally out of their control. And we're going to look a little bit later at the actual breakdown of the playoff standings right now. But last week when they played Frankfurt, they rested Obi, who was kind of like a game time decision. And it seemed like they rested him to get him ready for Paris. He played great here against Paris. He did go for over 100 yards, 109 yards on 18 carries. But I think that without him last week, it kind of stifled their offense. And by the time they realized, oh, shit, we're kind of in a pickle here in the fourth quarter when they started to put up points on the board, it was too late. And so that's kind of what I take away from this game. This game could have gotten or gone either way for Madrid or Paris, but Madrid could have been in such a different situation if they had just taken that game the week before a little more serious. But you touched on it, man. Zach Edwards, obviously with a rainy, sloppy game, neither quarterback had that great of an individual performance, especially with their completion percentage. That's going to happen for any quarterback. The criticism that I have heard from or about Zach Edwards, this is coming from kind of people around the league, sort of anonymous sources, and I haven't watched enough to know exactly how I feel about this criticism, is that Zach Edwards is phenomenal in some of the easier games, and in the big games does not show up as much. However, I think he did show up here in the fourth quarter, especially on the ground, especially when it was just time to take the game into his own hand. You look at that conversion for the touchdown in the fourth quarter. I don't think that was a designed QB draw. I think that, you look at the receivers, they're running routes there. I think that was, he just saw the opening and took off. And so that I do have to respect about Edwards. What do you think about that criticism, Matt, about Zachary Edwards? Obviously, one of the more talked about quarterbacks. He had a lot of success in this league, but showing up at his best in big games.
Yeah, it has been something I've heard a lot. I've been critical a bit myself of just him coming into the clutch situations we saw early in the season with the Ryan Fire pick when he had a lot of time through the long interception to Tony Anderson. And then last few couple of weeks, this game, he was great. Against Berlin, when they started making that comeback, he made some really key runs and got out of the pocket and stuff like that. So I think gradually, this season, if you look at every single statistical stat, he has been better than the year before, in which he was better than the year before. So every single season, he's been getting better. I think this is the best rendition we've ever seen, including the old Barcelona days. This is prime Zach Edwards, in my opinion.
There we go. And then in the chat, ELFpedia, who has great statistics and takes, especially on Twitter, ELFpedia says, Zach can do everything. My opinion, he has to trust his teammates. Then Paris will be able to beat anyone. If he doesn't trust them, he tries everything on his own, which doesn't always work. I think that's a really good assessment there, because when you feel like you have to take everything into your own hands, obviously that doesn't work all the time, but it did work this weekend when he did take it into his own hands and score that game-tying touchdown, get him to overtime. So this one ends in a thriller, low-scoring but exciting, and the Paris Musketeers clinch the playoffs in their second ever year of existence. And the Madrid Bravos in their first year of existence are still in the conversation. We're going to touch on that in a second. Whew. Exciting one to kick off the week. Let's move to a little bit more of a chill game, because my heart rate is going up. Yeah. I'm at about 90 beats per minute. Talk to me about this one. Central Conference rematch. Milano Seamen taking on the Raiders T-Roll. This one was broadcasted by our very own colleague, Alex Malchow. What do you think of this one, man?
This was a sweetened show, man. When he came into this league, I said, look, this guy has all-star ability, all-star potential. I really think that he has that ability to be dynamic and explosive within this offense. We saw that. 104 in the air, 2 touchdowns. Both of them was massive. We can see it on the screen there. Look at the moves, the ability, the speed, the movement. He's just an elite level athlete. We've seen that. He's played in the XFL. Like, he's been around, and he has been a very big breath of fresh air from a team I think needed that. To go into the playoffs, they needed to get better receiver position because they've had inconsistencies. He's the guy. Perry looks a lot more comfortable with Sweeten in that team. Hasselvanta has been amazing as one of the better, probably the best, maybe backup running back, because Bonatti's been out. Hasselvanta still went for 101 yards. Granted, on a pretty poor Milano team. Obviously, they've been in kind of a slide for the last few weeks. They were pretty poor throughout. They didn't score any points. They got goose eggs, which is never a good thing. Their offense is just very erratic, I think, is what I would go for. They're boom or bust, and predominantly bust. Like, they've not been great. I think that's pretty evident to anyone who's watched the Milano Seamen. And they got the Dragons next week. Obviously, we'll talk about that. But I think that could be. I think I said a hot take a while back. That could be a game that would be a bit surprising with how poor Milan looked in this game. But I thought the score might be a little bit higher. I'm going to be wrong.
So did I. I think the T-Roll Raiders actually had the ability to, run up the score a little bit. I am surprised it was just 30-0, especially considering the Raiders may be in a points battle, depending on how they play and what the result is in their game against the Ravens this Sunday. Massive playoff implications in that one. Yeah, I mean, you said it, man. Milan has not been as good since they sent Bronkhorst home. Obviously, he wasn't great, but he had some promise and he made some things happen. They've been especially disappointed, in my opinion, since they got rid of him. And so they're just finishing off the season kind of in the wrong direction. Whereas the Raiders T-Roll, they're finishing off the season in the right direction. And what I'm looking at here is the Raiders T-Roll. This is a team that's gotten better throughout the year. They've played the Surge twice. They beat them once. They lost to them early in the season. They played the Vienna Vikings twice, but both of those were early in the season. The second time they played them was N'Kosi Perry's first game here in Europe. He had been in Austria for about 4 days, and he still played solid. This T-Roll Raiders team is much different than the team in the first half of the season. They're trending in the right direction. I think they're really, really deadly, as we saw last week against the Surge, upsetting them. When you talk to players on the Surge who played against this team, this team is legit. And I think that's just what you said, man. Sweeting and Perry, this is the combination that team was looking for in terms of imports on the offensive side of the ball. I am having to eat my words of the tweet that I sent out months ago at the start of the year when I criticized this program for getting rid of D'Angelo Fulford and saying they're too quick to get rid of quarterbacks. I think they made the right decision here because N'Kosi Perry seems like the guy, and this team is where they need to be heading into this final week and into playoffs. They're looking good, man, and this one ends 30-0. I am so damn excited about the Raiders-Ravens game this weekend. I'm begging the ELF to let me broadcast this game, okay? So get me on the call. I'm very passionate about this one, but this one, Matt, ends 32-0. All right. Next one, Eastern Conference. Not too exciting either. Enthroners versus the Vikings. What do you got on this one, man?
It's kind of typical Enthroners at this point to start pretty well, and they start with a bit of momentum. They get the ball to, you watch every game in the last 5 weeks. They start all right, they get the ball to Nandor toss, and then it looks like they might be building some momentum, and then they ruin it. That kind of seems to be the way they move at the moment. And of course, they're playing a very, very specialized Vienna team that have just went undefeated in their regular season, and they are a phenomenal team. I think at this point, though, Vienna were taking it very, very lightly. They weren't underestimating them, but they were just having fun out there. They had 6 different people who rushed the ball. They had 7 people to call passes, and it's not just one rush. It's Pajarian got 7, Stancy got 5, Libandauer got 7. They're just playing fun football at the moment, and they've been absolutely dominant defensively. They were dominant. They had nearly 500 yards total on offense. They allowed only 208 and 3.47 yards per play for the Enthroners. But they did have some plays. The Enthroners got a pick because we know that Ben Holmes needs to get picked before he gets started. That's been something that's happened every single most weeks. But he did it, and then he started lighting them up. Reese Horn was incredible again, as we've come to just have expected from him this year. But they also had forced fumbles on No Torre in the red zone. They had these flashes that the Enthroners last season didn't have any of. So for me, this was interesting. And I think people will look at last season. They saw it was a closer game at the end of this because same fixture from last year's end of season. But I think this Enthroners team is 10 times better than the Enthroners team we saw last season. I think this Vienna team as well is a lot more dynamic, a lot more explosive. And I had doubts in them coming in because I wasn't 100% convinced with Holmes and with Weston Carr. They got Weston Carr out and they moved on from him and going Horn, which I love that signing. And I know Alex Malchow is a big fan. I was kind of wrong on Ben Holmes. I didn't think he'd be as good as he was. He's been great. He is definitely in a contender for Offensive Player of the Year. But for me, the jury is still out.
Jury's still out. It's tough, man. It's tough. And even when you talk to coaches around the league who have been in European football for a long time, when you are recruiting a quarterback to Europe for the first time, it's his first time playing ball in Europe, no matter how good he was in the States, in college, in some of these pro leagues, even in an NFL cusp camp, you never know what these quarterbacks are going to be like in Europe. Talking to Coach Kalaikai before the season about Ben Holmes, he said this is about as sure as you can be that a guy is going to work in Europe. and it's clear Ben Holmes is working. But it's always a risk with first-year quarterbacks. That's why you see a lot of experienced coaches going for quarterbacks that have played in Europe before, whether it's a Riley Hennessy, a Jadrian Clark, a Chad Jeffries, a Jacob Sullivan, these kind of guys. But Ben Holmes, I think, in terms of first-year quarterbacks, has really stormed onto the scene in a great way. Quick little highlight, Max, maybe you can put up the tweet of Milanovic after the game. This was an awesome representation of European football. Milanovic, obviously one of the best offensive linemen in all of Europe, giving some of the younger Enthroners O-linemen some tips after the game. I mean, imagine seeing this in college football or in the NFL. You would never see this. And this is something that we hammer home about American football in Europe. It's a sport that's growing. It's a little bit of a niche sport, but we're moving in the right direction. And it's really a family, just the entire community. And you see it right here with Milanovic. This was an awesome representation of what American football in Europe is all about, man. Honestly, that gave me like a little bit of chills.
Yeah, I love him. He's great. It's Vienna's finest, man. That's why they call him Vienna's finest. He's excellent. I love him to bits. I think he's one, like you said, one of the best linemen in the league, and he's passing on the secrets of the trade.
And he's great on the mic. He was on the show preseason earlier before the year. Guy is great on the mic, and we got to hopefully get him on the show again. I know he's going to be busy heading into playoffs. But really quickly before we move on to the next game, speaking of playoffs, slight concern I have for the Vienna Vikings. Matt, you and I were talking about this before going live. Vienna Vikings have a bye this week 14 bye. They have also secured a first week bye in the wild card round. So they are not going to play again until the semifinals. What is your opinion on having two back-to-back byes at this point in the season? Obviously, getting a bye at this point in the season is great for guys to get healed up, guys who are banged up. You can kind of regroup there. But two byes in a row, then you run the risk of getting a little bit rusty. By the time they play in that semifinal game again, it's going to be 3 weeks. What are your thoughts? Is this to their advantage? Is this not to their advantage? Chat, if you guys have an opinion on this, let us know also. What do you think, Matt?
I'm going to say disadvantage, because also one of those weeks you can't really study fully the team you think you're going to play, because you've got two options. If you study both of them, you're not putting the time into the team that you're going to play, so you might just consider that wasted time. Like you said, though, it should be able to get them back to being healthy, but I think it's more detrimental. Like you said, 2 weeks off, that's killer. A lot of teams don't come out great in bye weeks. I think Vienna do have the experience, of course, a championship winning team. They have a couple of really great guys that have been in that organization for a while, but they've also got quite a mixture of youth. A lot of these younger guys have made this team this season, the younger athletes that haven't necessarily experienced how to prep for a playoff run. So I think that's going to be a very interesting factor for me. I think they'll come out a little bit slow. They are quite a slow starting team as it is, to be completely honest. And I think that might maybe extend to the second quarter of that playoff game. And against someone, potentially, just say Paris, that could be the detrimental if they just get out to a big lead. You never know. We could see an upset, and the criticism of Vienna is that they haven't really played any of these top level teams. So
yeah,
we'll see.
100%. And that would be my worry for Vienna, the double bye weeks, and then also the main competition they had so far this year in the regular season was against the Raiders early on. And like we said, the Raiders now, with a settled N'Kosi Perry, is a way different team. I think that would look differently if the Raiders got to play against Vienna in these weeks and how they are now and the rhythm they're in right now. So it could look different. Just to let you guys know, we got an all-star crew in the Instagram chat right now. Glenn Tunga, Glenn VP, N'Kosi Perry is in the chat as well. The man, a retired legend, Goran Zech, the greatest safety to ever play in this league. So we got some ballers in the chat today on Monday morning. It's an exciting time for ELF football, man. All right. Yeah. Whew. Fired up. Like we said, fired up. Next game, Central Conference Showdown. I got the privilege of broadcasting this one. The Munich Ravens versus the Helvetic Mercenaries. Matt, what are your thoughts on this one?
I feel like Munich, they kind of took this one a little bit easy, and they needed a kick. They never really got out first gear. When they needed to, they got into second quite easily. It was a lot closer in that third quarter than I think a lot of people thought it was going to be. And they actually didn't really do outstanding for a team that's going to be hoping to go into the playoffs. You know, Mercs are not having aggressive seasons, but I expected a lot more out of Munich in this one. I expected this one to be along the lines of the Dragons win and along the lines of other wins they've had this season, quite a dominant one. They got no, kind of outplayed on offense. So they had less yards than the Mercs did. They had they weren't great. They were fine. They got the job done. They were pretty consistent. But like I said, they never really got out of the next gear. And come playoffs, that might come bite them, because the Mercs have been upset to a few teams. I think they exposed a few holes in a couple of teams this season, and I think they've just done it again. They're a very interesting team, but I like the way that the possession was also split 30 minutes, 30 minutes. Just pleasing the brain. I don't know why, but I like it.
We just got to give a shout out here. One of the most impressive things about the entire world of ELF football is Jamal Clay's ability to pop up on the internet anytime people are talking about the Helvetic Mercenaries. Jamal Clay, under the name Athletes Foreign, right there. He says, Helvetic, I'm here, baby. I agree with what you said, man. Helvetic, obviously, crippled with a lot of off-the-field stuff, but in the second half of the season, they finally got some things settled, and they've shown promise. They played against Vienna great, and this was just 10-0 at halftime. Helvetic was moving the ball on the Munich Ravens. Coming out in the second half, it seemed like the Ravens finally got their rhythm a little bit, but I would have liked to see the Ravens, if we're going to talk about them as a true playoff contender and a team that is entering into their biggest game of the year this week against the Raiders, I would have liked to see them be a little bit more dominant against a struggling Helvetic team. Got to give a shout out here to DeAndre Clayton, who's just playing, I think, his third game, stepping in for the injured Carlton Aiken. And, of course, Milan Spiller, who is on the cusp of becoming the single-season receiving yards leader for a European wide receiver. He has a chance to do that this weekend. So, yeah, this one, and there's a little bit of promise from the Helvetic Mercenaries, but ultimately the Ravens they've got too many weapons on offense. I said Justin Rodney and Oyewu, kind of the 1-2 punch in the backfields. Jeffrey's one of the more experienced quarterbacks, so even when he's not having like a phenomenal game, he's smart with the football. He kind of commands that offense. I'm just very, very curious to see the Ravens next week against a peaking, or what I think is a peaking, Raiders T-roll team. So this one ends 38-13 for the Munich Ravens, and they are going to be battling for a playoff spot next weekend. All right. Next game, Matt. We've got this one was an interesting one, and you can gloat a little bit, because I think you called it Frankfurt Galaxy versus the Wroclaw Panthers. Talk to me about this one, man.
Oh, I just want to say, Coach Cool, man, where's my credit? He was like, no one believed, and I believed in the Panthers. I believed in the Panthers. They had a great game plan. They really did. And I think, obviously, the big thing is McKay's injury. And that, of course, was a massive factor. However, I still think the Panthers were going to win this one quite convincingly when they came into it. The Galaxy have struggled against elite running backs. David Brzozowski is an elite running back. I think he's one of the very few in this league that you would, especially as a homegrown, you would consider as a marquee running back. He was phenomenal in this game, as was Norwood, who is a triple threat. You got the receiving game. He is a receiver. Naturally, at UCLA, he was a receiver. He ran the ball. Obviously, that's kind of what we've been expecting from him with these magic plays behind the backfield. Jakob Mazin got himself a passing touchdown. Andrea Botte Moreno has been incredible in the red zone in these short yardage situations at tight end. The big thing, 586 yards in offense. They could not stop the Panthers at all. It was 5-6 yards a carry. I know the stats were a little bit weird, just a few mistakes, but it really felt like David had like 400 yards rushing. He was going 6 yards, 10 yards, 12 yards, 6 yards, 12 yards. Like, he was just moving. I think he's an elite running back. He had 29 carries on the total on the day. One of the players that could be MVP for this week, absolutely. Markel Castle did what he could. And I want to give a shout out to Mac as well. Like, he stepped in, did an amazing job. Actually had 278 yards in the passing game. But like, the thing for me was the Galaxy extending the end of the game. Like, the last 2 minutes of that game took about 20 minutes in real time. I feel like they were trying to save face by getting a few consolation points on the board. And in my opinion, it kind of not harshed it a little bit, but it's kind of like, you need to get these players off the field. You've already had a player had severe injuries, and it's time to let go of this game rather than trying to put some points up on the board and try and save face. But obviously the players want to play. That's their choice. But in terms of a coaching standpoint, I would just ran the ball out and tried not to risk any injuries. But that was just my opinion at the end of that game.
Yeah. So this one actually, I mean, I was a little bit surprised at how big of a blowout this was. I mean, I saw like kind of shut a lot of people up. I mean, most people were picking Frankfurt, especially after that performance last week against Madrid. This just kind of shows actually how close a lot of these teams are. I think there's kind of like a tier one with like 2 or 3 teams at the top. And then there's a tier 2 where a lot of these teams could be in the conversation. Frankfurt and Roslaw, both teams that have been disappointing this year, but actually have the potential to be good. And they both got a lot of talent. Here we see Devin Burrell with the kick return touchdown. This man is a baller, obviously in the conversation for special teams player of the year once again after doing it last year. I was little impressed and kind of intrigued at kind of how creative Rafsal gets on offense with not having like a traditional drop back pocket passer with Norwood, but they're so creative with what they're doing on offense. They're getting people the ball in so many different ways, kind of like double passes, Batella Moreno in the backfield, taking snaps, throwing the ball, AJ Wentland scoring touchdowns out of the backfield. I mean, just a lot of different creative ways to get guys the ball. So that was very interesting. Obviously, big story here, Matthew McKay, and maybe this game would have looked a little bit differently if he had stayed in the game. I believe he got hurt near the first, second quarter there, and he played fantastically last week. And so could be a factor here. We wish him the best because he was really kind of stepping into his rhythm here. And let's see what we got. Our director Maxie says we got some good stuff in the chat right now and on Instagram. Yeah, we do. Yeah, we got, going back to some of the last games. Oh no, here we'll go on this one. Stefan Oski says maybe the Eastern Conference is not as weak as people say. Winky face. It's so hard to tell. I think you're right there. I think none of the conferences are as weak as they say, because even we're talking about, okay, the Central Conference is weak. But they are most likely going to have 3 teams in the playoffs, the most teams in the playoffs. We talked about the Western Conference being the dominant conference, and it's very likely they're going to just have 2. So it's interesting, man. And I don't think that we can throw away any conference and say that one conference is the weak conference. There's a lot of good teams in all of them. Then looking at ELF PETA here in the chat says the Panthers just need to get away from the hire and fire mentality, stability with the imports, and they would be a contender. I agree with that 100%. I think that if they would have had stability and just kept Duncan, they'd be very close to being in the playoff conversation. What do you think about that, Matt?
Yeah, I mean, me and you talked off show as well about the Panthers, about how like amazing their team can be in terms of a recruitment standpoint. They've had Turpin, they've had Malik Stanley, they've had Tony Tate, they've had Keanu Ebanks, they've had so many like amazing players that have gone on to do things after the Panthers or before the Panthers. They are a model organization if they just sorted out the quarterback situation. They got Matt Cole, a guy that took NFL snaps, and his speed in this game was just shows the levels of NFL speed, by the way. That corner round, oh my goodness. But yeah, I really do agree. I think they could be a very elite team. They just need to sort out that quarterback, I guess, if and when they do, but I'm hoping they do.
Yeah, and staying here on the Panthers for a second, Maxie, can you put up the graphic, the tweets from ELFpedia? Like we said, great stuff here. And look at the increase in average attendance for the Panthers this year. I mean, they've done such a good job with marketing and creating that demand for American football out there in Poland. And just from what I've heard, like on the ground from the inside people, they do a great job of marketing throughout the city and getting people involved, and it shows up here in the numbers. So the Panthers are really like a first-rate organization in Europe in many, many aspects. I would just love to see them have a little bit of consistency. The thing is, like, look at some of these NFL teams. You draft a quarterback in the first round, and that's going to be the equivalent here of bringing over your American quarterback. If he has a bad 2 or 3 games, are you really going to just cut him right then? Are you going to do that? Or are you going to put in some time and go, hey, this guy is new to Europe and needs a little bit of time for development. We're going to stick with him and have some consistency. I would just love to see more teams do that, especially the Panthers. So hopefully in this offseason, they get a little bit more stability. And then, Maxie, throw up the other tweet there, staying on the Frankfurt topic. Markel Castle was the Triple Crown winner last year. Had a little bit of inconsistency at quarterback this year, but suddenly he is back in the race for the ELF receiving yards leader. Both Reese Horn and Aaron Jackson have a bye, and Markel Castle sitting there in the 3rd place position And what is that math? He needs 33 receiving yards to win the receiving yards title. You think he's going to do it, Matt?
Oh, that's close. I think Paris are going to want him to do that on them as well. That's an interesting one. I think Mac's going to be presumably starting. He loves throwing the castle, so I think he's going to do it. I think he's going to do it.
That's great. Earlier in the season, I wasn't thinking that was going to happen, but it seems like it might just happen. So this one out in Poland, interesting results. Good for the Panthers there. Next one, the game that I was at, a rainy showdown in Stuttgart. Barcelona Dragons flew on up to beautiful Stuttgart, Germany to play my home team, the Stuttgart Surge. Matt, I know you're excited to talk about this one. Game of the week. Game of the week.
Game of the week. This one was a game of the week. If you're Riley Hennessy, you had an amazing game again, as always. Definitely hitting up some more form. He didn't play great in the last time these teams meet, and I think he heard that and wanted to show out this one. He did great. The run game, obviously, on both sides was really the talking point. Surge ran the rock really effectively. Dragons, it absolutely didn't. Dragons turnovers. And, of course, the big thing this season with the Dragons has been the background issues and whatnot. But it was a dismantling. I think that's pretty evident. But on the really deep silver lining, we might see some Dragon players, silver lining of the Spanish talents being able to showcase more. We might get some more guys come into the league from this. So I'm I'm trying to find some deep things to say about this, but a lot of interceptions by the defense. But yeah, Surge utter domination, and they move on pretty
there
easily.
You go. We got to give a shout out to Kai Hunter, typically a running back for the Surge, one of the running backs in that rushing rotation for the squad usually, but he played 3 quarters of quarterback this week, and he actually did really well. He went 6 for 9 through the air, threw for 126 yards and a touchdown, and then added on 17 rushes for 135 yards and another rushing touchdown on the ground. So he really backed down. I mean, he's not a quarterback, man. And he was actually throwing the ball. A lot of times when you get a running back like this, you really just end up running wildcat. He was throwing the ball. He was throwing the ball deep. He was connecting with wide receivers. He was commanding the offense. It was very impressive. So you got to give a shout out to him. And then Lewis Geyer, 8 catches, 121 yards. That puts him at 12 touchdowns on the season. And he's right behind Reese Horn, who's got 13. So Geyer's got the opportunity next week against the Helvetic Mercenaries to flip that and be the receiving touchdown leader or tie, depending on how that goes. But I'm sure he's going to be gunning for that one. So this one ends in a big blowout for the Surge, who are very likely now going to, if they take care of business next week against the Helvetic Mercenaries, they're going to end up as the 2 seed, and we'll get that first week bye in the playoffs. All right. Next game. And then we're going to get into the MVP here in a second. We got 2 more games. This one was an interesting one. Cologne versus Hamburg. Matt, thoughts on this one?
I love this game. This game was great. My favorite game of the week. And even with the Paris and Madrid one, this was my favorite. I think that Cologne came out with the absolute perfect strategy. Those runs, those short passes, utilized amazingly, getting Weed on his legs. As soon as they throw deep, he throws a pick. That's not what he is, right? He is just a dink and dunk, tear you apart, find the zones. He was spectacular when they let him do that, and he went to work in this game. Over 300 yards, amazing on the ground. There's 2 massive long runs, the run to seal the game at the end. He's fired up. I was fired up. They're amazing on third down efficiency. Their drives were so good, so thought out and amazing. And Will Lytle, I want to shout Will Lytle. I did think about underrated Americans. Will Lytle could be an all-star interior defensive line. He was amazing. Not a lot of Americans in the interior defensive line. He is so good, especially as a pass rusher. And I know that playing him in Finland, I saw him and how good he is at rushing the passer. We came on in that as well. Fulford had an all right game. He kind of got a little bit heavy at the end, just kind of like someone's up there somewhere. Let me just throw a bomb. But Torrent Justice, solid game, but Strater as well. He had an amazing stop on that fourth and 1, just cutting right through the middle of the team. But so clutch. Lorax as well, like the receiving game, both Fender, Lorax, Frolik, all these great homegrown receivers have been the difference maker for the teams, for Cologne coming through this last 3 or 4 games. Hill had quite a game, but because of these amazing homegrown receivers are massively underrated, they could finish with a even record. And I love that. I'm a massive Cologne fan.
Well, I'm with you 100%, Matt. I am rooting for Cologne. What I take away from this game is I just hope so badly that Cologne brings Isaiah Weed back, that they don't restart and try and get a new quarterback. I know he hasn't been the most consistent, but he's so damn talented, man. And when he's on, he's on. Very, very good this week. Obviously, he went 300 yards through the air. Great completion percentage, 25 for 33. And he did have a pick, but the pick was a deep shot. It was kind of a jump ball that could have gone either way. And I like that he takes those shots right there. The man looked like Lamar Jackson running around, and he's just so deadly with his feet as well, which is something that I really like. And I love that for quarterbacks in the ELF. I think that works really well in Europe, is to have a mobile quarterback. Even some of the quarterbacks that we don't think about as traditional runners, Chad Jeffries, Riley Hennessy, these guys are actually quite good on the ground. So I think having that kind of that mobility as a quarterback that Weed brings is so great. And what I hope that Cologne brings him back. Let him build off of this. They're going to win next week. They are going to finish 6-6, playing in probably the most competitive conference. This is something to build on for Cologne. They're moving in the right direction. So, Cologne franchise, bring back Isaiah Weed, legalize it, build off this. Cologne Centurions. I'm impressed, man. I'm impressed.
Awesome game. It really was so good. I'm so
Really
excited for the team.
really, really good. Maxie's telling me there's something going on here in the Twitch chat. Let me see what we got. Oh, we get that here on this as well. All right. He said, Ruffy Maximus says he should go to the Panthers. Isaiah Weed. Oh, you know what? If that's what you're talking about, I would love that. He would be deadly there. I think I think a couple teams should go after Isaiah Weed. I do think that.
Yeah.
But I would love for him. Yeah.
I'm on like a project at the moment, some off-season signings. I had Zozo going to Surge as well. I think that could be a deadly. There's a lot of moves this off-season. You know what I mean? Like that would be a monstrous signing. But I think we'll stay in this league.
If Jordan Newman gets his hands in Zozo Brzezowski, it's tough to get out of that recruiting gravity from Jordan Newman. It's a guy that you want to play for, and you feel that, players feel that within the first conversation. So I would love that. I would absolutely love that. Anyway, this game ends 30-23. Cologne pick up another win and are looking to go 500. Got one more game this year. Our last game of the week, and then we're going to talk playoff implications quickly and MVP. We've got the Rhine Fire. We've got the Berlin Thunder. Rhine Fire rolled on this one. Matt, thoughts?
Dominant defensive display. I think that's what I got out of it. Obviously, we're going to talk about Glenn, but like the defensive display of the Rhine Fire, I think was most evident to me. Was just 0 points allowed on offensive standpoint in the first half. Of course, Aaron Jackson. He was going to be on the score sheet inevitably. He got that great return touchdown. Sullivan didn't look great, threw multiple interceptions. Marshall, I thought I have a conspiracy. Marshall returns that pick 6. He stepped out of bounds. I think he was doing it to try and get Glenn 30 touchdowns. That's just my hot take. I think he did it on purpose, but he's an amazing corner. I think the one thing on Marshall was he was going with the head a lot. He had a couple calls, I think, in the playoffs. Might get called for some targeting stuff. He's going there with the head quite a lot, but he was still an outstanding corner. Let's talk about Glenn. 4 touchdowns, 30 touchdowns this season. If there is a player that is going to be MVP, it has to be him. We'll talk about MVP candidacy, but oh my goodness, 30 touchdowns in one season. History. Sledgender did great as well. He had an amazing long reception. And Jadrian was on playoff form. Like it was a clinic. It was easy. It was light work. Very routine. Very comfortable. Again, the defensive stance was really impressive, especially for a Berlin team that have a really high-powered offense. They locked that up, didn't allow many points, especially in the first half. Second half comes out, throw a pick 6. It's Berlin in the second half, so I kind of expected it. But yeah, a very good performance by a team that's going to be making a long playoff run, in my opinion.
Yeah, this team is deadly. They have started to peak at exactly the right time. Obviously, some struggles, some missteps earlier in the season, but they've just built on that. And a lot of that has been on the back of Glenn Tunga, man. And now obviously Jadrian's hitting his stride again. He's looking more like 2023 form, but this Rhine Fire team is so deadly. It's funny. Everybody kind of freaked out when they lost the Madrid Bravos. The era of Rhine Fire is over. The era of Rhine Fire is not over, and they are one of the heavyweights heading into the playoffs. I'm excited about them, man. And we do have an interesting tweet here about Glenn Tunga. Glenn, I think you're in the chat here. I don't even know if you know this about yourself. Glenn Tunga has scored 186 points in this regular season, 30 rushing touchdowns, 1 receiving touchdown. This means he scored more points than Barcelona, Prague, Fehervar, Milano Seamen, and the Helvetic Mercenaries. Glenn Tunga individually has more points than 5 teams in the league. He's, what would that put him? 12th in the league in terms of teams for touchdowns. It's ridiculous, man.
That's unreal. And then I put a stat up as well that he has not scored since like week 13 of last year. Like he scored a receiving touchdown in the finals, so it didn't count as a rush. But like he's scored of every week. Obviously, the one that he's played, I'm not counting bye weeks in that. Phenomenal. Definitely the best like running back season we've ever had. I'll stand on that. I had an argument with Alex Malchow about Madro London's season or Glenn's season. I'm taking Glenn's season. Yards don't win games. Touchdowns win games. Glenn all the way.
And no offense to London, but the league is a lot more competitive now in year 4 than it was in year 1 and 2. All of the best European talent is here in this league. In those first years, it was still a little bit split. A lot of guys playing in different leagues. The Americans that are in this league are much more talented now. I don't think that that's a fair conversation. I mean, this performance that Glenn Tunga is putting on in year 4, the most competitive league in the ELF so far, is iconic. It's going to go down in history. And the Rhine Fire roll to victory 47-14. They finished their regular season at 11-1, and they've got a bye week now. And most likely, I mean, Maxie, maybe if you want to throw up the playoff bracket right now, you see here currently Rhine Fire at the number 2 position. However, this is subject to change and honestly most likely going to change with the Stuttgart Surge because they have one more game against Helvetic this week. And if they take care of business there, then the Surge will finish at 3, and then we'll get Rhine Fire playing in the wild card round, which I think could be good because the back-to-back bye weeks at this point in the season, weird, could throw you off your rhythm. Yeah, just like we were saying a little bit earlier that. So finally, we see a little bit of shakeup in the playoff picture, Matt. We got the top side of the bracket there. Paris Musketeers versus the Raiders T-Roll going into week 14 here. Do you think that this is how it's going to end up after next week? And what are your thoughts about this bracket right now?
I think we'll see the Fire and Surge switch. I think that's reasonable. And then I'm really excited about Paris and Raiders. I think that could be like a really iconic game. It's the Raiders power run and sweeten, and it's against, you got Magic Zach, you got Austin, who's been in great form. You've got a few injuries on Paris, who I think could come into play. But like that matchup like fascinates me. And then whatever one goes into it gives Vienna a really, really tough challenge. Even if it's the Raiders, they're going for revenge. If it's Paris, that's the first like massive test in a while for Vienna. Rhine Fire against Munich, 2 really heavy hitting offenses playing against each other. You've got McKnight, you've got Stanley, you've got Chad, you've got Jay, you've got Tommy Moore, you've got Glenn. Like the star-studded playoffs everywhere. I think this might be the playoff bracket I'm most excited about in ELF history. Like it's going to be box office stuff.
Oh, man, I'm so damn excited. I cannot wait. And well, you were just mentioning it, man. The quarterbacks that we've got on these teams, these guys are absolute ballers. I mean, you see, it's got all the elite quarterbacks have found their way into the playoffs. They say it in the NFL, you get the head coach right and the quarterback right, you're set. Same thing in the ELF. You get the head coach right and the quarterback right, you're set. And I like the head coach quarterback combinations for most of these teams since they have made their way to be in the playoff conversation. Now, the situation, we go to the chat, Ricardo Oliveira, if Paris loses and the Raiders win, it's a home game here. Yep, there is a possibility for it being a switch there. It's in the other situation, obviously, the big game on Sunday. Like I said, begging the ELF to let me broadcast it, the Raiders versus the Ravens. If the Raiders win, everything's locked in for them. The Ravens still have an opportunity and honestly most likely will still make it because their point differential against Madrid. If the Ravens beat the Raiders, the point differential is a little bit closer and Madrid has a little bit more hope. If you're a Madrid Bravos fan, you're hoping the Ravens win. If you're a Raiders fan or a Ravens fan, obviously you're hoping you guys win as well. So that's how our playoff picture is looking here after 13 weeks. One more week of regular season football, and then we're heading into the playoffs. Now, Matt, it's time to talk about the good performances from week 13, the guys who balled out, showed out, and impressed us. Shall we dive on into it? The first guy in our conversation, and before we get started here, guys in the chat, give us your thoughts, because we're going to nominate 2 players, and then about an hour or 2 after this show, you're going to be able to vote on social media, on Instagram, for the MVP of the week. So, first one, N'Kosi Perry, 18 for 22, 252 yards, 4 total touchdowns as they rolled against the Milano Seamen. I'm a big fan of Perry. He was absolutely clutch the week before against the Surge. Guy is balling as they get ready for playoffs. N'Kosi Perry.
There we go. His partner in crime as well. We've got to talk about Sweeten. Absolutely spectacular game. 104 yards, 2 touchdowns on 5 catches. He's explosive. He's going to be so instrumental to this team's playoff run. He's the guy. I'm begging we get to see more of him this season. I don't want this to be the last. I want them just to make the playoffs just so I can see Sweeten and Perry together again. That'd be great.
It's such a dynamic duo, man. And I got to see it firsthand in person when they played the Surge. And obviously, I was sad about them connecting and looking so good, but it was cool to see in person. 2 ballers. Ben Holmes, the Vienna Vikings. Ben VP, 24 for 37, 317 yards, 4 passing touchdowns. Easy work for Ben Holmes. This is a guy that has led his team to a 12-0 perfect regular season, and he's in the conversation this week.
There we go. Another receiver as well. Leading the league, one of the best in the league this season. Came in a game after a lot of people. 140 yards, 2 touchdowns. Burning Enthroners all day. He's open on every single route. They can use him in a ton of different routes. I think probably every route tree you could imagine. Respawn's that guy. Still one of the best receivers in the league.
Absolutely. And then Chad Jeffries, quarterback of the Munich Ravens. Very solid game against the Mercenaries. 20 for 29, 226 yards, 4 total touchdowns. Got it done through the air and on the ground. Command of the offense. Chad Jeffries in the conversation this week.
There we go. I'm going to go defense, though. Johannes Zeigbel, another great game for him. He's one of the more underrated pass rushers in the entire league. 2 sacks for him, 2 tackles for loss, 4 total tackles. He had a few injuries last season. We just didn't get a full extension of him this year. He's been everywhere. Amazing. Massively underrated part of this Munich defense. And he's going to be another player that's really instrumental into getting around to N'Kosi in this final week of the season.
There we go. And then back to the offensive side of the ball, Markel Castle. We talked about it earlier in the show. He has a big chance. He needs 33 yards this week to be the receiving leader. Well, he had 220 last week. So the best indicator of future behavior is past behavior. And if Markel Castle behaves like he did last week, he will get that record, 10 catches and a touchdown, playing with 2 different quarterbacks as well. That's not to be overlooked. That adds to the performance.
Absolutely. Now, David Brzozowski in the same game, marquee tailback, outstanding, going for just running down the galaxy. He was the reason, in my opinion, they won this game. 147 rushing yards, 2 touchdowns. Just what he brought to that in terms of everything that he did turn to gold. He was amazing, massive performance, and one of the best running backs. If it wasn't for Glenn having such an outstanding season, people would be talking about Zozo a lot more. Fantastic player.
We go, and then on the same squad, just out of Norwood, balling out the triple threat, doing it in all sorts of different ways, getting creative with it, and just putting up all sorts of different yards and touchdowns. He had a great game and a very impressive performance for the whole Panthers team, man.
Yeah, a little bit of a rogue one, me. Riley Hennessy there. Like, he didn't need to play that much, but even when he was in, he went 10 for 12 for 184 and 4. Like, he was, for the limited time that he played, he was on fire. So hard to really ignore him when you get 4 total touchdowns and such wild efficiency. One of actually like 3 passes he scored. So
yeah,
that's kind of mad.
I mean, I think Riley played like 20 plays. So in plays per capita, if we would extrapolate this out, this would be like 15 touchdowns and 1,000 yards. So way to go, right, guy. But you only played in the first quarter. But we love that you're in the conversation. And then with the surge, Levin Libano, the young running back, he went crazy, man. 14 rushes, 146 yards, 2 touchdowns, had a couple great runs. He burst one up the side in front of my camera. Speedster. It was great. So we got another surge guy in the conversation.
We're not done with him either.
We're not done.
We're not done. Is it running back? Is it quarterback? I'm not sure. It's Kai Hunter. He went 6 for 9 on passing with 17 rushes as well, 261 total yards, 2 touchdowns. When you needed him, he came in, played great, played lights out in a position that he's not normally in. It was weird, but I'm a fan of it. It was great.
I would, just like I said earlier, we were talking about the game. I was so impressed with Kai Hunter. I mean, he was back there truly playing quarterback and throwing the ball downfield. And he actually had a deep ball to Lewis Geyer, where Lewis Geyer made an incredible catch against his helmet. It was like the Super Bowl catch. They ended up calling it incomplete. That's controversial, but that's neither here nor there. He looked good, Kai Hunter there. All right, and then my guy, Isaiah Weed, legal. Oh, whoa. Okay, Max, go back. My boy, Raheem Wilson. Raheem Wilson, the veteran, who's just been great since he joined the Surge. He added 2 interceptions. I believe that makes him the league leader in interceptions, if I am not wrong. He also had 6 tackles and a TFL. Absolute baller. Not only a baller, but he brings such a great energy to that Surge sideline and such veteran leadership. We love that, my man. Dream Heem, as he's called.
I like that. That's good. Who I got now? Weed? I got Weed?
Weed.
There we go. I got Isaiah Weed. Legalizer, baby, was outstanding in this game. Just dink and dunking. 447 total yards, 3 touchdowns, and more importantly, the win. That's what matters most. But he was so good in this game, so fired up. He is the heart of this team right now. He did outstanding and definitely one of the front runners for the award this week.
Absolutely. And last but not least, the man himself, Glenn VP, Glenn Tunga, 28 rushes, 144, and 4 more touchdowns to his touchdown collection. 30 damn touchdowns. I mean, that's great for a career. He's done that in 1 regular season. So those are our guys that are in the conversation right now. Now, Matt and I are going to officially each nominate one. You guys in the chat, maybe you can sway us one way or another. ELFPDS says players who play against the Dragons should not be named at all. That's a fair criticism right there. No, they can be named. We can still name them in this part of the conversation. But when we talk about the true nominations, then, maybe there's some merit to what you said right there. Matt, which way are you leaning? Oh, right, real quick, before you tell me where you're leaning, Roman 95 Offski says Milanovic is the true MVP for just that goodwill and football brotherhood that he showed this week. I agree. He's if there was a man of the week award, that would be Milanovic. But Matt, what are your thoughts? Where are you leaning? Talk to me.
I mean, it's hard. History was made. We're not going to see round 5 for a little while, so I've got to go with my boy Glenn. 30 rushing touchdowns. We might never see that. Might be entering into the record books as like the most unbreakable record ever. Like he's averaging more than 2 touchdowns a game. So unbelievable. But I think he's my guy. Like this was just another dominating game. Like he's so good. He's got to be my MVP.
There we go. Anyone in the chat, is there any pushback on Glenn? And keep in mind, Glenn is in the chat right now, so he will see if you push back. Let me see what we got here in the chat. Oh, that's Marlo. That's Marlo. Marlon Franklin Jr. He says he needs that Citizen Player of the Week. What's up, Marlon? Maxie, we didn't have him in there, did we? He had a great performance though as well.
Yeah, he did.
The thing for me when I'm doing MVP, and remember last week I had kind of a out of the box one. I nominated Philip Hahn, even though he didn't have the craziest stats, is because for me, what really matters for MVP of the week is the level of competition in the game. And that's why I've got my eye on a guy that played in a tight ball game and really led his team. Marlon had 7 tackles and 1 pick. Hey, Marlon, that's a great performance, man, but the other guys, the other defensive guys that we mentioned had 2 picks. So try and get 2 picks, and then we'll be talking about you for that MVP of the week. Great performance nonetheless, though, brother. Anyway, what I was saying, Matt, I like to nominate a guy that played in a competitive ball game that truly made a difference and wasn't in such a, in a comfortable win. That's why I am leaning towards the man who they say legalize it, Isaiah Weed. We talked about him, man. I just think he looked so great. He's been inconsistent, but when he's on, he's on. He led his team to victory in a tight ball game. I am leaning towards Isaiah Weed. Guys, if you have some pushback, argue against me in the chat. Let me know, but that's where I'm leaning. What do you think, Matt? Is that a fair lean?
I think that's very fair. Like it was Glenn, Zozo, and like Weed. I was like kind of going between all 3 of them just because they had such good games. Like Weed really put the team on his back at the end. So I think it's hard to really argue with. Like, you could have picked any one of them, and I probably would be agreeing with you. But I think Weed's probably the guy that was challenging Glenn the most for this MVP. But I'm still going to go with Glenn respectfully. But Weed was outstanding. I obviously streamed that game, and he was amazing. So
we have a little. Sorry to cut you off, Matt. We got a little controversy because Marlshon says we missed the stat. He had 2 picks in the last game. Maxie's our producer director. Maxie, can you verify this? We're getting a little controversy here. Because I want to make sure we never overlook a good defensive performance. As a former defensive player, Maxie's on it. Marlshon, hang out here for a second. We're going to see. But we're waiting on that. However, I am still thinking that I am going to go with Isaiah Weed. Ricardo Oliveira says legalize it. ELFpedia says I'm okay with Weed. And we did get the verification. Marlshon had 2 interceptions, so he deserves an official shout out. He's officially in the conversation here with those 2 picks. Similar performance to Raheem Wilson. Love a good defensive performance from my defensive brothers. But I'm going Isaiah Weed. So we got Tunga and Weed, Matt. I think that's a good combination. What do you think?
I think that's fair. I might put Marlshon as like my sub MVP to get in that 1 foot out of bounds just to set up Glenn's 29th. So I think Marlshon deserves my like an assisted MVP. You know, if I can give that out. He was excellent as well as a coverage guy. He laid the boom a few times. Big tackler. So I'm a big fan of Marlshon, but. Yeah, well, I'm going to stick with Glenn just because of the historical, the feeling 4 touchdowns and 26-30 is spectacular.
All right, so there we have it, guys. Those are our 2 official nominees, Glenn Tunga and Isaiah Weed. We got 2 offensive guys this week. You know, one of these, I love when we nominate defensive guys. We got 2 offensive great performances this week. So that's what we have. So you guys can vote officially on social media, on the Instagram story. Should be up in an hour or 2. Our great director, producer, Maxie's working on that graphic right there. So, Matt, there we have it, man. That's a fun show. It was a fun weekend at ELF football.
It really was. And next week's going to be even more explosive, I think. It's going to be good.
I am so excited. I'm so pumped. So, guys, tune back in on Thursday. We're going to be doing a preview of this final week of the regular season. Got some good ones. Big game on Sunday that I got my eyes on. That's circled. Thank you, everyone, for joining us in the chat, for participating in there. You guys really help make the show what it is. And all you guys on Instagram. Marlshon, I'm sorry that you didn't get nominated officially, but big shout out to a great defensive performance right there. All right, everybody, we are going to be signing off, and we will see you on Thursday. Peace out.
Try.